Because the last time the Americans made a film about Somali people, it paved the way for greater military intervention on the Somali coastline. The last time they made a film, Captain Phillips, you know, the I'm the Captain Now, that was in 2013, and it came at the heel of the world catching on to the fact that the so-called Somali pirates were not bad people. With the conflict and the insecurity for the boats on sea, there would be much less fishing in southern Somalia, and when that happened, for several years, you'll get better fish communities. The reefs themselves, all the reefs in East Africa, are recovering from major bleaching events in 1998, so the corals may be in varied condition, but the fish will recover quite quickly if there's no fishing pressure. In the years when the pirates were the most active on the Somali coastline, the fish, the reefs, the entire ecological health of the area started to bounce back in a way that it hadn't been prior to the 1990s, probably even as far back as the 80s. And since we're talking about films, let's talk about Aleel. My memory is bad. I think it was made in 1992, maybe late 80s at the earliest. And that film talks about the impact of other countries, companies, conglomerates, whatever. I mean, they're one and the same, really, these things. The impact of them dumping onto our oceans everything you can imagine, every nuclear waste that they didn't want to be responsible for, safely disposing of. They would just dump onto the Somali coastline because they knew that our government at the time was already weakening by the late 80s, and by the 1990s, full-on collapse. They knew that there would be no oversight if they just dumped onto our coastline. They knew that nobody would catch them. The people who relied on the fishing industry on the coastline, the people who for generations had made their livelihoods and their food and their survival from fishing, started to see their catches getting smaller and smaller until eventually they were rationing themselves to a fraction of what they had been used to for generations. Their own coastline, they have to ration until eventually they would go out to fish and there would be nothing to catch because the large fishing ships, not even boats, the large industrial fishing ships would take pretty much everything you could catch. There was nothing to fish, there was nothing to catch, and whatever there was to catch was poisoned, genuinely poisoned. I'm gonna put stuff in this video and you will see it for yourself, but as far back as the late 1980s and 1990s, Somali people knew about this when we're talking about it and making stories about it, warning each other about it. And so we get to 2011 and we see that the people can't take it anymore, or even earlier than 2011, because the height of the piracy was, I think, from like 2009 to 2011, something like that. I think the kidnapping that the Captain Phillips story, I say kidnapping, it was really just commandeering a ship that shouldn't have been in our ocean waters to begin with, but that story happened in 2009 and that was probably the height of it, from 2009 to 2011. Then they made that film in 2012. By this time the ocean life was starting to bounce back better than it had been in decades. Keep that in mind. Then the Americans made that film and manufactured consent for greater heavy military intervention on the Somali coastline. You understand? And the pirates were beat back. And now that shows the impact of the pirates being beaten, because our coastline is back to being completely poisoned and the ecological health has declined once again.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Maanta waxaa ka dhacday afqiyaamo xeebta magaalada Boosaaso, gaar ahaan xeebta Mareero. Waxaa ka dhacday ilaa 2,000 xabo oo baraha ka soo caadiyay waa badda cas. Badda cas horta waa kacsan tahay ayaamaha kan. Waxaan u sheegayaa ummadda reer Boosaaso ama xeebaha aagooda ku nool inaanay badda isku gelin, isaga fogaadaanin. waa mucjisada ugu horeysay caalamka ka dhacday saan filayo. Aan horta intaan jiray ma arag wax ka sheekeeyna ma maqal. Abu Bara bad ka soo baxday soo caariday waa reer dhan caari xitaa lama oran karo. Qoomiyad dhan oo badda ku jiday oo laga soo safeeyay. Waxaan u maleynayaa